Hey folks, back in the foam forge here, making this mace. We will get into finishing this today, rounding out the head and putting flanges on it, and then doing the whole seal coat paint, and then foaming our flanges so we have a striking surface, and then also putting bands around it. Should be a fun time. Let's get into it. Alright, now that we've got our head rounded out, we just need to create our flanges, decide how many we're going to put on here, usually between 4 to 6. This one looks like it could probably hold 6, so we'll get those constructed, attach them to this, and then we'll be able to put some rings on here, and then be able to plasti dip and finish. Alright, so our flanges are going to measure 1 inch wide by 8 inches long. We're going to use a piece here, then we're going to make a template, and then overlay that, cut those out, seal those together, and then seal those to our mace. But first things first, what we need to do is make our template. These don't have to be two-sided, is the good thing, just because they're going to get inset into this. So it's not going to be a folding stencil. We just have to figure out how we want our flanges to look. I think I'm going to have it come out a little bit, make a hook style pattern almost, and then come down for the rest of it. And then we need to measure that and make sure that is not over 8 inches. And it is. So we'll just round out the bottom part so we don't lose our detail on the top. We can bring this down to 8 inches. It can go a little longer. It'll just curl down the bottom side of the mace, or it'll curl around the upside of the mace. Again, that's just your preference. You make whatever you want. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to show you how to do it. We're going to go ahead and cut this out, and then we will draw that template onto our blue foam, and then we will cut that out, heat seal it together. That way we can meet the minimum striking requirements of 1 inch. If you've ever built before for a LARP, you know that that's probably one of the hardest things to get right, is the strike surface. Everybody does it different. It's different at most everybody's games. It can vary. Some people only require you to have like a 1/2 inch of paddings. Others require you to have 2 to 3 inches of padding. Like I said, it just depends on where you're larping at and who is running it. Alright, so got one of our templates made here. I'm going to cut these all out, and then I'll show you how to heat sink them together, and then we'll put them on the mace. Alright, now that we've got all of our flange made, we need to refine the shape of them on the belt sander, and that way we can get a uniform look to all of them, and that way they also have a nice flat edge to adhere to our mace head on. And so we'll do that. All right, now that we've got all our flanges done, what we need to do is we need to make some marks on the top of this mace here and figure out where these guys are going to live. Once we get that done, we can cut a V into these, heat them a little bit, they'll expand some, and then we'll be able to sink these into the actual mace head. Other than aesthetics, it's really just for a good hold. The better the hold for flanges, the longer they will last. So let's go ahead and mark that. We have 6 flanges. So we'll take our marker. We need to get a center point. And then we can draw on 3 lines that will all connect in the center. We need to make sure that we make them hopefully evenly spaced. If it's not evenly spaced, that's completely fine. As long as it's functional and you enjoy using it, that's really all that matters. You know, like I've said before on the channel, nothing is ever perfect. Like nothing is ever perfect, no matter what you do in life. You just have to realize that you are doing a good job no matter what you're doing. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take these all the way down to the end here, but we're going to need some help. So we're going to take a piece of scrap foam here, and we're going to put it on here by our line so we can get a straight line all the way down here so we know where to cut our V channel. And I'll get the rest of those done and come back and show you how to cut those in. All right, we've got all of our marks made on here. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of measure a top stopping point for our mace head to have the flanges on it. We don't want them to go over a certain point on the head. About right there is good. And then we can take our marker and make a circle around this area. That way we know where we have a stopping point, and we don't have to cut or heat seal into that circle. That way we know where our flanges stop in the top of the mace. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut a V out of all of these lines, and then we're going to heat them so it opens up a little bit so we can inset these inside of that. We might go around it as well and heat that open a little bit just to make it a little more flare on it. So what we're going to do is about a ½ inch. We're going to set that in the cut itself and then drag it along the outside of the line, probably about at least ¼ inch. And we're going to do that both ways. And if we do it right, the cut in the center should meet up. And that is exactly what we want to happen. Even if we get a little bit shallow, there'll just be a little thin membrane there that needs to pull out. And then we get our little Valley O Plenty here. That way we can heat that open, and then this will sit right in there, and it'll actually make this flange a little bit shorter, but that's what we want. We want it to, you know, not be a gargantuan head, right? But that's what they'll look like when they're on. And we just got to get the rest of these cut and then set. All right, now that we have our insets and they are heat sealed, what it is time to do is to weld on all of our flanges. So we'll gather those up over here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start them from the top down. That way we make sure we get the best adhesion on the part that we know is going to be our most used strike point. That way they don't rip off during battle, which can be really, really annoying. All right, now we've got all of our flanges attached. What we have to do next is I want to put a few rings on here, especially for the handle area. That way it looks a little cooler. Most of the time when medieval days, when they would have a wooden haft on their weapons, they would put rings around it to help it not break. And that's kind of what we're going to symbolize. But we'll get into that here soon. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to take a scrap piece of foam here, and then we are going to wrap it around in certain sections. Probably one here, and then one here. So that way we can have our ringlets on there. What we're going to do is we're going to heat them on. As with just about everything else I do with glue foam, I don't really like to use glue because it adheres better if you have the foam. So what we're going to do is make our initial mark here, so we know that's about how far around we have to go, and then we're going to cut that. And don't worry if you have overlap or anything like that, because what we're going to do is go around this with a Dremel. That way we can, smooth it out, make it look more like a ring before we seal everything. And then after we get these on, we'll do our wood cuts, and then we will heat those open, and then we will pretty much be ready to go ahead and seal this thing with Plasti Dip and paint it. All right, now that we've got our rings on, what we're going to do is we're going to cut the wood grain into the haft, then we'll heat that open. Then we'll do some Dremel work on the rings and clean up some of the spots on the head that got overheated. And then we will be ready for Plasti Dip. Just like the video before I made about the skull splitter sword, about a 1/4 of an inch is all you really need when you're doing your reliefs. You just want to go from a good point, make sure to make it wavy, do whatever kind of wood grain you really want to. The more texture you add to it, the better it looks. But of course, as always, you do what you want. This is just what I do and how I like the look of it. You don't have to do what I'm doing by any means. You can leave this plain as can be. or just make it look like it's metal in the end. It is fully up to you and what you are wanting to do and what look you are going to try to achieve. This part doesn't take too long at all. I just like to make sure that I'm keeping it not uniform. So I don't want it to look like it's staged or fake or anything like that. That way it gives it a little bit more life. Makes it look a bit funner. I do also try and match my lines from the top to the sides. And that way it looks like one cohesive piece of wood. And then we are just about done with this step here. And we're going to add a couple to the pommel end here. These ones can just be really, really quick because they're going to go down into the base of the weapon, and we don't want to have any chance to expose any of the core, which it shouldn't. There's about 1.5 inches or so worth of foam behind there. Then we'll just heat up our heat gun here, run it over these slash marks, and they will open up real nice for us. And it depends on how deep you got them, on how much relief you're going to get. But you don't want to superheat this. You're not trying to bond it or seal it yet or weld it together or anything like that. We just want these seams to open up a bit. All right, now you can see that wood grain in there. Once we paint it, it'll give it a really cool effect, make it look like actual wood. Next thing we got to do is get into some Dremel work for these rings. All right, now that we've got everything going on this, we're going to do a little bit of Dremel work and clean up these rings. All right, now that we've got our dremeling done, we are going to resort to the foam block. This has sandpaper on the outsides, except for right here. It's just a piece of foam. We're going to go around that, smooth those out a little bit, and then we can heat seal and plasti dip. Now we have our rings all sanded up nicely. We're going to heat seal it, and then we're going to plasti dip, and then we'll get into painting. If you'd like to learn how to plasti dip, go over to my other video, the final part of the skull splitter sword. That goes over how to plasti dip, paint, and seal. I will show you how I'm going to paint this one because the haft is going to be a little different than on the previous videos. Also, before plasti dipping, I am going to go around this handle with some athletics tape. That way, whenever I do plasti dip it, the handle gets a little more rigid. I like to have a really tough handle. Sometimes with the blue foam, it can be a little squeezy and squishy, but we want to pre-squeeze it before we put our before we do the plasti dipping, so that way it kind of sinks in more and gets a bit more rigid.